Alright, YouTube, so we're back, of course, talking about some more Crisis Core Reunion, and we have a pretty big update, it would seem, and this is coming out before we even all have access to the game, right? We were talking about, I guess, the ending of Remake and stuff again, and like episode intermission, but we're also talking about the cross. Obviously, this cross has been a conversation for so long now, I guess like a year and a half or so, because, you know, episode intermission came out summer of 2021. But if you go back to when we first got Crisis Core Reunion revealed, I don't remember if it was in like that first video we did about the 25th anniversary live event, or maybe a couple of videos after that. We talked about, because this initial trailer right here gives us a brief look at the inside of the church, only the discussion between Zack and Aerith. We talked about whether or not the church is going to have the cross or not. Like, this is a conversation we've had before, months ago at this point. All that all matters is that when it comes to the Remake project, Remake itself did not have this cross. When you go to the church in Chapter 8, when you meet Aerith, the cross is just missing. There's like a stone kind of outline where they might have hung the cross or something at some point, whatever you want to call it. But simply put, the wooden cross is not there, whereas it popped up at the end of episode intermission. And when it comes to Crisis Core Reunion, we're wondering if there's going to be any new shit, like, you know, any stamp logos anywhere, any sort of allusions to the Terrier timeline potentially, or as I just mentioned, whether or not the cross is going to be there in the church or not. Because in the original Crisis Core, the cross is there. And throughout the entire of the FF7 compilation for the last, I guess, 24 to 25 years now, the wooden cross has appeared in everything except for Remake. And it turns out that the cross is also missing in Crisis Core Reunion. I don't exactly know where this screen grab's from because I just got it off of Twitter, but looking into it, we've actually had confirmation of the cross missing for a while because we've had this picture of Zack more or less since like Crisis Core Reunion got revealed. And if you look behind him, you can see where the cross is also missing. I guess I just never noticed. I suppose I didn't realize that he's standing like directly in front of where the cross was supposed to be. That's kind of the issue there. Now, before we even continue, we obviously got to have this conversation because we have to have this conversation every time we talk about this. People chalk this up to a dev error, more so that it's apparently a different team that does like in-game stuff for like Remake and shit versus a different team that does the high-quality cinematics when it comes to Remake. And that's where this like discrepancy comes from. But I guess the idea here is that the people who, you know, did the in-game like field models and stuff for Remake, like the inside of the church and stuff like that, are just terrible, apparently, according to these like fans of these games that talk about these games and do these theories for these games. Like, they would just forget this iconic cross that's supposed to be there. They just slipped their mind, and somehow slipped their mind too when they re-released Remake with Integrate, and then somehow slipped their mind yet again when it came to Crisis Core Reunion. That's the logic we're dealing with here from some people. And so I can't really take this part of the conversation all that seriously, just because like it's one thing when it was just Remake. It's like, okay, even if I've always disagreed with this, it's one game, right? Maybe in Remake, I'll be the devil's advocate here. Maybe in Remake, they just fucked up somehow and just forgot to put this cross in here, forgot to put it in when they re-released it on the PS5 and shit, right? Maybe that happened, sure. But now we're seeing it in a completely different game. And at what point do we acknowledge that? Like, Reunion is missing the cross as well. At what point do we give this some actual fucking thought? It's a very similar conversation to the different Midgar stuff that we talked about at the end of Remake, after the Whisper Dome explodes and all the gold particles fall. Like, you see in front of Zack a different Midgar, right? It's differently designed. But again, that was one game, right? It's like, whatever, maybe again, this is like an old asset, it's a far away asset, a low quality asset potentially, maybe that's why it looks different than the Midgar that we see all throughout Remake. But then we've seen that same exact styled fucking Midgar pop up in First Soldier. And it's like, okay, now we're at multiple games. We're at 2 games now. Can we give this some actual thought? People still brush it off. And then we see these exact designed Midgar with like key art for Crisis Core Reunion. It's like, now we're looking at 3 different games now that have this differently designed Midgar, these different designed Mako reactors. Can we actually use our brains? And look, for the sake of this video, I'll continue to play devil's advocate. Maybe this all means nothing, right? A lot of people chalk this up to the dev team shit, and because that's like the easiest explanation for what's going on here. That's why there's the missing crosses and all this other inconsistent shit. It's different dev teams, all that other stuff, okay? But I see it the other way. How is the easiest explanation not the alternate timeline stuff? Because we know that that's a thing, right? We know that there's 2 different timeline things with the Terrier logo and the Beagle logo and shit, right? How is that not the better explanation than the team just sucks? Because the thing is, when it comes to like Remake, for example, that is a from the ground up brand new game. It's a remake of OG FF7, but it's obviously nothing like it visually or gameplay wise. Whereas Crisis Core Reunion is in between a remake and a remaster, right? They aren't brand new assets from the ground up, right? They're better looking assets over the old assets. So they would literally have to go out of their way to not include the cross when it comes to Reunion, which is why I think it's intentional. That's why everybody else thinks it's intentional, except for some people out there, I guess. Now, what does the 2 different crosses mean, or the lack of a cross mean? Like, that's obviously something we don't have answers to. One of the common ideas out there is that, like, FF7 Original and Remake are happening, like, simultaneously, different dimensions, different timelines, however you want to call it, whatever the case. But the wooden cross itself seems to be indicative of the FF7 original timeline, just because that's where we've always seen it, right? It's all throughout the compilation. It's only Remake And now Reunion, which was made specifically to connect to Remake, are the ones that are missing it. And we've even talked about the idea of like OG FF7's Midgar existing, the one that's inside the Singularity, is very, very reminiscent of like a blend between Remake's Midgar and OG FF7's Midgar. It's possible that maybe that's where Zack ends up at the end of Remake, or maybe our group ends up in that other Midgar, that other timeline. Like, we don't know, right? But as I point out multiple times, and I've seen other people point out too, like the shot composition of this scene at the end of Episode Intermission is intentionally making you look at the cross. You can say whatever else you want about the ending or what's happening with Zack's story. Is he alive? Is he dead? Alternate timelines? It doesn't matter. They want you to look at this cross. There's a particular reason for that. That's why whenever this happens, nobody even realized the cross was missing in Remake, right? It wasn't until Episode Intermission happened where people were like, hang on, there's a big-ass wooden cross right here, and it wasn't there in Remake. But hold on, this cross has always existed. Why is it missing from Remake? Like, that's what got the whole conversation going, because of the framing of this shot. It's why I personally believe, and plenty of other people out there think the same thing as well, that it has a meaning. There's a purpose to this. Now, could we be wrong? Sure. I try to always say that when we talk about different theories and discussions. On the ones that I more so believe, like, we talk about a lot of different theories out there, I don't always believe them. But until we have, like, some sort of confirmation or whatever that there is some major misstep between, like, the in-game team and, like, the CGI team, I just think it has a purpose. And to kind of continue that conversation, like, if there was some major oversight when it comes to Remake/Integrate, right, they just somehow forgot to put the cross in the church, why would that not be rectified with Crisis Core Reunion? Like, why would they make that mistake yet again years after Remake with a completely brand new game? Like, it just, come on. It just seems ridiculous to me. Now, I do want to clarify that when it comes to the launch trailer we got for Crisis Core Reunion, we actually do get to see the cross inside the church, right? This is from a cutscene towards the end of the game. Now, I'm not going to argue against this to try to make myself sound right. I just want to discuss it. And the cutscenes, for the most part, are not altered in this game, right? I think they changed character models a bit. Like, I think Eros Ribbon's different to match, like, what it looks like more so in, like, Remake or something like that. And, of course, I have the Buster Sword, right? They got rid of the gold hilt and Geo Buster Sword and just made it look like what the Buster Sword looks like, what it's supposed to look like in, like, Remake and shit. If we do, like, a side-by-side of Zack and a cinematic scene from Crisis Core Reunion versus Remake, like, they just look differently. It's still, like, the same old kind of weird-looking PSP Zack. Like, the graphics were good on the PSP, obviously. Like, Crisis Core had fantastic cinematics, but I've always thought Zack looked weird in the cinematics, and they've clearly not updated it, right? In fact, if you hop back to this image, you can see that they're of the same quality, despite there being like 15 years between these games, right? Like, so they haven't really changed the cinematics at all. They literally just put like a skin over the Buster Sword. That's like the difference, which would explain to me why we're still seeing the cross in a cinematic, because it's supposed to be there. Like, it was there in the original game. But I know some people are going to see that or hear that and disagree, but whatever the case, they're already disagreeing anyway, so who gives a shit? So as it stands right now, my dudes, we have FF7 Remake and Crisis Core Reunion. The cross is missing. Episode Intermission, the cross is there in the church. And the rest of the FF7 compilation, the cross is also there. What does it mean? I have no goddamn idea. It's interesting to talk about. It's fun to talk about. I don't know the purpose. And hopefully we'll know that before long. So, of course, I want to pass it off to you guys. So, we talked about this a couple months back, right? Several months ago, whatever it was, about the possibility of the cross when it comes to Reunion. Is it going to be there? Is it not going to be there, right? And the kind of idea behind that was, like, depending on what to do with the cross, if it's there or if it's not there, then that could tell us something. And the fact that it's missing, right? And Reunion's literally made specifically to connect to Remake. That's the point of its existence. And the fact that they went out of their way, because you have to go out of your way to not include the goddamn cross. How do you look at that and not think that it means something? It's just strange to me. But what are your thoughts on this? That's the video, my dudes. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new. Social networks in the description below. Follow me on Twitter, @davidYT. That's it. Bye.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more. And nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Rogaine or leave it like Cobain.